But we decided that we wanted to live among the poor, that whole incarnational mindset that we think Jesus cared a lot about. How do you dive in? We've got to make a difference by living among and creating programs that are not just the relief stuff, but how do you get to the tough issues of building sustainability. So we moved into a house 47 years ago now that was had been a poor neighborhood. So it was kind of one of those realities of what it means to be missional. But by the grace of God, they surely embraced us through the years. But we never left this neighborhood.
Welcome to the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast, where we help you experience and bring renewal to your mission field. Join us and receive free resources at innovativechurchleaders.org. On today's episode of the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast, I'm excited to have with me Jimmy Dorrell. How are you doing, Jimmy?
I'm fine. Thanks for being here.
Jimmy is a longtime mentor, both personally and from afar. I was a Baylor student, went through poverty simulation. He started the church under the bridge when I was there in the early 90s. And Mission Waco has turned into Mission World. You guys have really expanded your influence. There's lots of churches under the bridges across the nation, really. Why don't you share a little bit about your story, Jimmy? I've just so been inspired by you over the years, but how did you and your wife really gain a heart for the poor and really living out your faith in that context?
Yeah. I grew up a very traditional kid. I have a 7-year Sunday school attendance pin, so I'm a really legitimate Pharisee. And as a part of that, I was a good kid. Came to Baylor in '68 and was a religion major. And as a part of that experience, became a youth director at a Baptist church here in Waco. Did that for full time at Baylor and then an extra year, and really loved it. One of the things that you don't get a lot of times in college is you go to the city, but you don't go to the community. You just go to the restaurants. And so I had the chance to get to know them. And part of that experience was that we were invited to come over to a very poor part of town, what was called No Man's Land. A pastor named Dewey Pinckney, and poverty like I'd never seen. And my first dive into being out of my cultural background. Finished up that job and then took a job as the recreation director at the Waco State Home here in Waco, which was a kids ages 6 to 17 for dependent and neglected kids that the state of Texas had taken away from their parents because of child abuse and neglect. First day on the job, got cussed out by a 6-year-old, and it went downhill from there. It was the hardest job I ever had. I had the keys to the gym and to the swimming pool, but these were broken kids and from all ages. I had to have a little talk with God to remind him how important I thought I was. Thought he'd forgotten about my Sunday school pen. And as it turns out, it didn't matter at all to him. And I had to put up or shut up. It was my time to say, okay, I'll go back and I'll have a different attitude and I'll learn to love those kids who had so many holes in their life because of their background. Stayed 3 years and it changed me. I hope a few of them got changed. But those 3 years were formative in who we became. Janet was a volunteer out there. We got married eventually in seminary. While I was in seminary, I worked inner city, so there was this same dichotomy, sit around, talk theology in the morning in the seminary classroom, but then go down to the urban setting where the Section 8 housing project was, and just really deal with these tough issues of life that so many had grown up in and ask how these things fit together. So questioning and wondering. Had a call from a pastor named Ralph Neighbor out of Houston. Ralph was a renegade Baptist guy that was doing renewal, so doing cell groups. And so we went to Korea to study the cell group movement there and had some really good training. Came back and worked in Houston several years with him. And I needed that renewal church. I needed to see a church outside the box that gave me some hope that we as the institutional church weren't getting. And so really life-changing. But at the end of that, it was time for us to see the world. We had a 1-year-old child and decided that it really was, let's just take off. And so we sold our house and bought 2 tickets around the world. The child was free. And we had to be back in 4.5 months. And so without an itinerary, we just traveled and we went around the world and worked among the poor, did volunteer in several countries. Ended up in India, got to meet Mother Teresa and got to work in the slums there with the Sisters of Charity, as well as some really tough situations. And that whole experience was life-changing. I mean, already God was changing me, but now we're seeing kids who are dying of hunger and parents who were starving themselves. And so at the end of that trip, we said, what are we going to do with our lives? Well, you can't just forget these images. So we came back to Waco, which was not our hometown, but we decided this was our place. Waco has a lot of poverty, less now than it did then. But we decided that we wanted to live among the poor, that whole incarnational mindset that we think Jesus cared a lot about. How do you dive in by being among? I ran into a group called CCDA, Christian Community Development Association, and we found our best friends. They thought like us. They were fun, but they were working with the same tough issues we were in Waco, and got involved, got on the national board, and spent the next many years working with and through CCDA as well as in Waco. And through those years, just these experiences just captured our heart. Think we've got to make a difference by living among and creating programs that are not just the relief stuff, but how do you get to the tough issues of building sustainability. So we moved into a house 47 years ago now that had been a poor neighborhood. It was a rich neighborhood before that. It had become a poor neighborhood. And so we bought a 4,000 square foot house and moved into this ratty old house on prostitutes on the streets, crack dealers on the corner, had a bar across the street. Had one lady living in the house when we bought it that had 40 cats in a one-bedroom apartment. And so we moved in, and my father-in-law was already mad at me because we'd taken the only grandchild around the world, and now we're moving into a poor neighborhood. So it was kind of one of those realities of what it means to be missional. Is sometimes they don't understand, but by the grace of God, they surely embraced us through the years. But we never left this neighborhood, so everything was next step. We built a basketball court at my house, so kids began to come. They had nowhere else to play. We got to know the girls on the street. Mamas would say, can you help me with this? My wife got to know everybody in the neighborhood. It was just the next step kind of mindset, and that began what we years later called Mission Waco, and it just kept growing from there.
Well, it's beautiful ministry. I'm a blessed product of your ministry. I think your poverty simulation, I spent the night on the front lawn of that house along with my youth group and my fiance at the time. This poverty simulation, the books you've written, which will be giving away copies of some of your books to those who are already signed up for my email newsletter. And I just wanted to mention, though, some of what I learned was God's heart for the poor, as demonstrated in the life of Jesus. Talk about whether it's the messages of the books that you've written, or poverty simulation, Mission Waco, and all that you do. I mean, really, part of what you're trying to do is mobilize the middle class, to serve the least of these. What are some of the theological underpinnings that you try to make sure pastors and church leaders know why we should be bringing more of heaven to earth to those who have so little?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's a question I think we don't deal with enough in the local church. You're right. Clearly, Jesus dealt with the poor and the marginalized. And we began to do that, knowing it was right. But the more we stayed in it, the more we began to learn this not only local but global poverty. So for us, it was a theological commitment, and we were emotionally committed because these were our friends and neighborhood people. But they were also this sense of two-way street. We were learning from them, and I think, sometimes have a middle-class understanding that thinks that I'm here to help you. When I look back at my life, I wrote a book one time about what I've learned about God from the poor, because I really do believe there are things that we can't learn in a seminary or college setting that are just different. And Jesus pointed out the lady who gave the last little bit she had. I've been in those places at Church Under the Bridge when the people who were walking forward, and I was kind of judging them, thinking they're just going to ask me for money, and they would hand me $10 to give to somebody that was more poor than they. Those are breaking kinds of places. So the quality of being among instead of just doing for. And I think the traditional middle class church, we still get caught in this, let's just give people stuff. And the CCDA movement challenged that as well and built principles around what does it really like to help. And at some level, it just means a lot of relational situations. So I think that's what the Bible is. It's just theologically, it's about relationships with one another. But because we're so cut off from them, we live in the suburbs, or maybe I do a class in around the state of Texas called Perspectives, some of you know about, and we may be teaching that class in a suburb where it's 20 miles to the most closest poor people, and there's this gap because of our lifestyle choices. So it takes a little effort and a little work, but I do think that is the basic principle of Scripture, that to be among like Jesus was.
That incarnational ministry is what we're called towards. And I loved what you said. There's so much we can learn from those who have so little yet have so much faith. And I'm really excited partnering with the Beyond Us conference coming up in October. We're going to be giving away free registration for someone who's lucky enough to win it. Make sure you go to innovativechurchleaders.org to sign up for our newsletter for a chance to win. Talk about the heart behind the Beyond Us conference. You can get more details at beyondusconference.org. We've got Christine Kane coming. We have Tom Lynn from InterVarsity. We've got Chris Clayman of Joshua Project, Bob Roberts. Please tell us a little bit about the heart behind this conference and what you're hoping to see God do.
Yeah, I appreciate the question and affirmation of what we're doing. I think it had been a while in Waco since I'd been at a missions conference. I don't know, I grew up as a kid. We'd see the missionary come overseas and come speak at our church, and somebody have a conference. But it had been a while, and of course, with Baylor and Truett Seminary, and there's a good atmosphere. God is doing some great stuff among these kids and students around here. But a lot of times we noticed it became just that internal relational thing, as God is moving in my heart and I'm excited and I'm more committed to Him than ever. But for us, if the gospel ends there, it's just half a gospel. And so the rest of it has to be what I do with it. How do I change my neighborhood, change my world? And so we decided this season of life that I'd retired from Mission Waco, still doing church under the bridge, but I decided I had the time. So went to Baylor Spiritual Life Group and then Seminary, and they said, yes, we got to do this. So by the grace of God, we've been working hard to pull this thing together and have been blessed every time we turn around, something better happens. So we're excited and hope folks will come be a part of that.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time here in October 2025. It's really something you said I think we need to point out. Waco does not have as much poverty. And I cannot help but think Mission Waco, Church Under the Bridge, the way you've tried to mobilize the middle class, that God has answered those prayers, that some of those folks that were in a really tough spot as kids are now in a better place. They're able to contribute. I mean, really, isn't that our calling to bring more of heaven to earth, for the church to make a difference? What encouragement do you have for pastors who have that same inkling of wanting to make a difference, but maybe get so caught up in Sundays that come in or making sure they're taking good care of the people that are there rather than mobilizing their people? What sort of encouragement do you have for church leaders about mobilizing their folks to be on mission?
I think most pastors at a deep level know that's right. You're right, the busyness of everybody's schedule, but there's also some training that we do in community development about some of the things that we do wrongly. So the product may mean just go out on one time a year and give people stuff. And I think it's some of that is just not knowing how. But once a church gets past the give stuff away mindset into the relationships, it becomes part of the DNA of the church. I get to go to church on Sunday with blacks and whites and browns and rich and poor, Baylor professors and mentally ill folks. It's the joy of the kingdom. And I would never trade it to go to a different place, because there's that sense of the barriers are being broken by the Holy Spirit. And I think sometimes we just get to be a part of it. So you got to taste it a little bit. So coming up and going through a poverty simulation, going under the bridge with us, seeing it will create a longing, but it's not easy. I'll be honest. It is not easy for a middle-class pastor to help turn around a middle-class church, besides the special effort kinds of things, to really want that. But we can help them get there, and there's others can as well.
I highly recommend missionwaco.org. It was so transformative. I share several of the stories of my time at Baylor, learning from you. You taught a class at Baylor, going through poverty simulation and being at the Church Under the Bridge. Thank you for the ways you've made such a difference, Jimmy. It's just an honor to be able to spend just a few minutes with you, and super excited that even in your retirement, you're still mobilizing the church. And I think the beyondusconference.org is another great opportunity for pastors to come and learn and discover and mobilize their staff or mobilize their key leaders. It's going to be inspiring, but there's going to be a lot of workshops. I think we're something between 20 to 30 workshops already that can be really tangible ways to move forward. I would love one last question, if that's all right. You've been, in ministry for so many years now. Certainly over the years, you've seen the church doing well. You've seen the church struggling. You've seen and know the stories of pastors who burned out or flamed out. What would you say to encourage pastors to continue to do the hard work of ministry faithfully and effectively? I would just love to hear just a voice of encouragement you might have for us.
I think sometimes we even think we have sabbaticals every so many years, that means to go find a retreat place and then sit by the lake and fish. And I would challenge you to think otherwise. Maybe get out of your place of safety and security and come get in the middle of the pain for a few days. It doesn't have to be the whole sabbatical, but I have found that there are those out of the comfort zone experiences that make church leaders want more. And no, it's not going to be challenging, but I think the average person doesn't have enough real experience in those areas that are positive to say this is right. There's something kingdom oriented about this. So I just say the word compassion, by the way, means to enter the pain. It means to get up out of your place of safety and security and enter the pain. And I think that's what we're all called to do.
Of that. Well, we have an executive pastor here at Gateway in Austin named Charles Dishinger. He took his wife and kids to Haiti for his sabbatical, teamed with Mission of Hope there. And it was life-changing for all of them. It was hard, but it's something they'll look back on the rest of their lives, whereas some of those days by the lake, they may not remember.
Right.
Jimmy, thank you for all you're doing and continue to do. We're grateful for you and your ministry.
Thank you, my brother.
Thanks for listening to the Innovative Church Leaders Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and share as we bring spirit-led innovation, reach new people, and make disciples who make disciples. Be sure to sign up for our email newsletter at innovativechurchleaders.org for free resources and an opportunity to join a cohort with Dr. N.T. Wright.